Welcome to Talk Tonic Los Angeles. I'm your host, Dino, and this is ReedWeed Law Edition with resident criminal defense attorney Michael Reed of Cannabis Legal Help. During this podcast, we'll be discussing various news stories circling the cannabis industry. The information you hear during the show is in no way meant to serve as any legal advice. Its sole purpose is to bring light some of the new happenings that can both negatively and positively affect cannabis community at large. With that out of the way, welcome Michael Reed. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, man?
Good. What's going on with cannabis news? Anything interesting out there that we should be paying attention to?
Well, since it's Halloween, it's also in a couple of weeks. It's going to be Election Day,
Oh, that's right.
and it's actually cannabis is on the ballot across the country. It's in places that you would be, I guess, less likely to see it. So just to recap on the scoreboard, 19 states out of 50 have fully legalized. Recreationally, you name it, it is legal in their borders. Those states, I mean, California, where we are, of course, is one of them. And pretty much every state touching us, you have Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Washington above that, Alaska way above that, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island. I always forget about that little state, Rhode Island. And the one next to it, same size, Vermont, and Virginia, followed by Washington. And then, of course, you have Washington, D.C., but that's a lot of controversy over theirs. They're being prevented. But anyway, those are all the legal states already. And then I believe we have 37 medical states, and most of the states I just read to you are those states included. But anyway, on the ballot, this coming ballot is South Dakota, which is interesting because they already legalized it, but that's being fought in their courts. So it's on their ballot again, I guess, is kind of it's being fought procedurally in their courts, like they did something wrong getting it on the ballot in the first place. So if this passes, I'm assuming, well, that whole thing is moot because now we got a whole new thing that's legalized it. North Dakota right next to them, and Arkansas, we talked about that in the past, Missouri, Maryland, which is kind of like one of those states that's kind of in the South, but kind of not. It's kind of right there in the middle. Oklahoma didn't get it on its ballot, unfortunately. They're one of the biggest medical states, actually, as far as growers and where people are moving these days. They didn't. It was like I think it was a technicality. The Supreme Court of Oklahoma prevented them from putting it on their ballot. So good luck to them. It'll be on the next one probably. And let's add them to the list because the states that didn't make it on this coming ballot, they already have plans in place, or they're already working on getting it on the next election, which will be in, I think, definitely in 24, but I think there's going to be something in 23, but definitely in 24. Florida, which has a huge medical cannabis program. Nebraska, out of nowhere. Wyoming, why not? Ohio, right next to them. And like I said, Oklahoma. So the writing is on the wall. It's first of all, if this interests you, and I mentioned one of your states that's on the ballot, get out there and vote. I mean, this is your opportunity to try to make sure you can do this legally if you're doing it illegally right now. But the grand scheme of this is that Biden recently did a little bit of pardon that affects thousands, a possible rescheduling domino effect, which is the bigger deal. But it just seems like the states are going to have to more and more chip away at this war against cannabis that's lasted over 100 years. And eventually it's just going to be the rest of the states knocking on the federal government's door saying, good morning, wake up. It's the 21st century.
Yeah, it's something of like you said, this has been going on for so long as far as the villainization of the herb and disinformation, of course, at its finest. We've heard about so many campaigns of the 50s and 60s, Reefer Madness, the movie, things like that have just been consistently been part of our zeitgeist for such a long time. So
Do you know that Reefer Madness was partially funded by the federal government to
yeah,
produce it?
no, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I did know that, and yeah, it's a shame because there's so much benefits to that plant that we are barely starting to understand, and that's just one aspect of it. But then we have, other things that need to be descheduled as well, like psilocybin, which is kind of
Sure.
low key, kind of flying under the radar, making headway while we were still talking about cannabis. Yeah. So, but with the whole Biden thing, we talked about it, I think a couple of weeks ago, him looking at having the I believe the Food and Drug Administration rescheduling it to a potential something. It's currently at a 1, and
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned it's there with like things like heroin, I believe, and
Yep.
cocaine and all these.
Cocaine's too.
Cocaine.
Fentanyl's too.
Wow, look at that, huh? That
Yeah.
that, that just blows my mind. So, any headway with that, or are we essentially waiting till after the year to kind of do things with
It's election time.
right?
I mean, there's this thing called the lame duck session, which is the time period in between the last days of the people who didn't get reelected or didn't run for reelection and the people who are going to be taken over, or the people who are just going to be continuing because they won. But if they call it this lame duck period, and every now and then they surprise us. I doubt much is coming. So I wouldn't, it's look next year.
Yeah, gotcha.
But anyway, something interesting came by my way, just moving to something else, is that, you know how we talked about previously that there was this hype about a breathalyzer test for a roadside test for cannabis a few years back, and
Yep.
then all of a sudden it just kind of faded away. Nobody was talking about it anymore, and yet they were so excited about it because they were so close with the technology, and yet nobody's talking for years. Well, I actually came across something that just is happening right here in our backyard with UCLA. They just produced in conjunction, or with a private company, but they just produced this technology. They're calling it a cannabis fuel cell or something like that. Um, it's a specialized cell directly for cannabis, but one of the big problems with cannabis is that they can maybe pick up detection, but so what? What does that mean? Cannabis stays in your system for a while. Detection doesn't really tell you anything as far as impairment. It just tells you that person has either been around or used cannabis in somewhat recent past. Anyway, so this new technology, essentially, it's using, I'm not going to get into the science because I'm not a scientist, but it's using a similar technology as the alcohol breathalyzer, but it's somehow different. And like the previous breathalyzers in the past, are claiming to be able to determine exact quantity, not just presence, but exact quantity in your body at a particular time. you know whether this is true, because again, this was actually published in a medical journal, so this is a real study.
Hmm.
This is a real device. They are developing it. But let's just say they have it. They figured it out. Eureka. They found a way to determine through the air, the molecules in the air and the gas in our body. They've found a way to convert it and somehow read that THC level in our body at that particular time, that's active in our body at that time. Well, there's so many problems with what I just said. Even if that technology is perfect, they're looking only for THC. THC is one of many cannabinoids in cannabis, and we're finding out that it is not the only one that causes an impairing effect. So if they're looking for only THC, they're not looking for everything that could potentially impair. The other underlying biggest problem is tolerance, something that alcohol, the science is out. No matter what any scientist or doctor or average Joe says, the science is there for alcohol. But when it 08 and above, doesn't matter what you argue unless you can prove that the test was wrong. But or if the cop was corrupt or whatever angle you're going to use. But when it comes to cannabis, that none of that matters, because you can take the same strain, the same quantity, the same potency, and give it to two individuals, one person who's never or barely engages and another person who engages all the time, and they're not going to have equal impairment, even though they smoke the same amount, the same quantity, the same potency, the same strain. So because you're rarely going to have two identical people like that because of tolerance, lots of fat, height, weight, gender, you just keep going. You don't have a simple test breathalyzer that's going to say this person's impaired, whereas this person is not impaired. You will have a breathalyzer that could say this person has cannabis in their system right now, and it is from recent use. I think that's the best they're going to probably get. And then the recent use is going to be the key to try to get a conviction against you, essentially. And then everything else is your driving pattern. What did you say? How did you sound? What did you smell like? Definitely not what did you taste like. But
Yeah. Well, you did say that this specific device will be able to determine the amount of cannabis that is potentially in your system. Now, one would say that, if you smoked 48 hours to that, wouldn't the amount that you have in your body be less, I guess, if you would imagine? And if you get pulled over and you're blowing into this device and it shows you have, I guess they would have to do studies to determine like how much someone would need to smoke in within, like, let's say, an hour period to formulate an amount that they could use for this said test.
not just an hour, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. You have to do so many different variables.
Yes. So I guess if they have it down to that, then there is potentially something there for them to work with. Yeah, I don't know. It seems kind of tricky. I think as a criminal defense lawyer, like as yourself, you would probably still be able to poke holes through that test.
Oh yeah. That test, all it's gonna. I mean, even the tests they currently have, even a blood test. There's this thing in the science right now, and this is probably going to change. But there's this idea of active THC and non-active THC. And the idea, what they're looking for is active THC to determine impairment. The word active has been placed in the category of recent use, to define it. So that's what they're looking for. And there is currently, I don't know this science, but I read the scientific papers on it, and the results all the time. But there is apparently a way to differentiate these different types of THC, whether it's just in your body from last night or last week or recent use. But even that, as I just said, even if they can tell me I have X amount of nanograms of active THC at this moment in time, that still does not tell you impairment. So it gives you one piece to the puzzle. It's not closing the book by any means.
Right. So it would have to be coupled with the eyewitness of the police officer saying this person was potentially driving very slow, like 20 miles below the speed limit. Tends to kind of
speeding is actually a example of non-impairment to cannabis. Seriously.
That's true. You're very right about that. Because yeah. So yes, I agree. Yeah, that definitely. But yeah, eyewitness would have to be coupled with that test, and even then, I'm sure you still would have the opportunity to defend your client.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very let me put it. I was actually explaining this to somebody the other day, the idea of tolerance, because you don't get this argument in alcohol ever. But the idea of tolerance go to Rush Limbaugh. You know, Rush Limbaugh is the very conservative talk show host. He passed away.
I've heard of of himself
I'm sure.
throughout the years, very much so. Yeah.
Very, very colorable person, very shocking
Yeah.
person in many things he says. But
Right.
anyway, he used to talk about how people who do drugs, should not get a trial and, should just, go to jail or whatever. And then it turns out he was abusing Oxycontin like crazy. I don't know if you heard about this, but
No.
what I heard, and this is why I'm talking about Rush Limbaugh when it comes to tolerance, is what I heard is he was popping 20 to 30 Oxycontin a day. And
Whoa.
I never taken an Oxycontin. I think if I was ever prescribed an Oxy, I think I would say, do you have anything lighter? Because that stuff's no joke.
No.
And if you're taking 30, now I don't know the milligram, but if you have to take 30, not 2, not 4, whatever, a little bit extra pain today, but if you have to take 30 a day, that tells me that your tolerance is so high. Your addiction, you probably are very addicted, but your tolerance has become so high that 29 didn't do it.
Number is 30.
30 was the number, whereas me, I think if I was given one Oxycontin pill,
Oh, man.
and it would be like, can I get 1/10, like, and maybe half of that, so I'll take 1/20 of one pill.
No, there's a lot of stories of people leaving the emergency room with these types of narcos, and they just, by a hook or crook, become addicted to them. And of course, our country has been very much affected by narcotics, and the use of these opioids has really I mean, the drug companies, I forgot which one was the one that recently got sued pretty badly, but it was a drop in the bucket still for them, because I don't know if it was Pfizer or Johnson and Johnson, but they had to pay out a certain amount to a specific state. And I can't think of the company, but anyhow, point in case is that they did recognize that what was happening in that state was malpractice on the doctor's part, of course, because the doctor has to prescribe that, but also not having any something to by the way, that drug company also created a drug to help combat the addiction part of it.
Yes, of course they did. Of course they did.
So
create the problem, but don't worry, we have the solution. Man, that's capitalism, huh? So anyway, I actually, now the when you said that sparked my memory, but I don't remember the name of the company.
Yeah. One of the big ones, either Pfizer or Johnson and Johnson. Yeah.
When it comes to money, people do horrible things. Anyway, so let me just mention to you something that's going on around the world. There's a push to cannabis right now below us. It's great. The president of Costa Rica just literally came in 7 months ago. They legalized medical cannabis, Costa Rica, 7 months ago, and president is coming out right now, and I think it was Chavez, his name. I can't even read my writing, actually. I believe this is President Chavez. He's coming out saying, let's push for full-on recreation, let's tax it. And I think the more interesting part about this is he says he's not really for it, but he's more for legalizing than for criminalizing.
Well, okay, so I feel like, if I can just read the tea leaves here, Costa Rica gets an enormous amount of people vacationing there.
Tourism dollars.
All the time. This would be like a really wonderful place for someone like myself or yourself or anybody that responsibly dabbles with cannabis and on their off time. And so if you're on a vacation and you're wanting to smoke some weed, well, Costa Rica sounds kind of nice, doesn't it? And it's legalized over there, so we don't have to worry about going try to meet up some drug dealer or whatever to get it. Yeah, it only makes sense that guy would do something like that.
I've been to Costa Rica. It was huge on ecotourism. I did the tourism stuff, did the zip lining, did the tubing down the river, did some speedboat fishing, which that was kind of taken for a ride on that one,
How does that
literally.
work?
Actually, it's pretty cool. I did it in Mexico the first time I did it in southern Mexico, and it was amazing because we caught mahi mahi. They called it El Dorado. We caught mahi mahi and mackerel and one other type of fish. And I don't know. I guess they see the thing speeding behind, like the lure, big lure speeding behind the boat, and maybe it drives the fish crazy, and they're like, I need to get that thing. So
Yeah,
these are predators going after this. These are predator fish.
I see.
Uh,
Okay, that makes sense.
so anyway, so I thought I saw something in Costa Rica when I was there. I'm like, oh, it's going to be just as amazing. Now we kind of got taken for a ride. We didn't leave early, and you got to go early, or for fishing. And it was supposed to be a lunch on a deserted beach island. Yeah, that was all BS. Anyway, uh, but besides, and of course, the person that sold me the package was MIA when I get back. Of course, they moved to a different place.
Yep.
But anyway, so yeah, for what you exactly said, Costa Rica, add that to the ecotourism. They don't have a military. It's a very peaceful country. It makes even more sense that way. But a little more south of them, good old Colombia, the country that used to be the coke. Oh, they still are pretty big in cocaine, but anyway, the Colombia, the president Petro, he just literally was sworn in, and he has said, we want to legalize, we want to tax it, make some money off of it. And he has a similar thing, no, leave criminalization in the past and open the door for harm reduction and public health.
Bravo.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, whatever, man. Like I don't care how it gets done, whether it's like with the intent of making money off it, capitalism, whatever, or it's just like this truly is a benevolent plant. I guess used responsibly, of course, and why not? So yeah, bravo to that. That's awesome.
yeah. I've never, I've heard good things about Colombia, actually. It's weird to say that because I remember seeing the documentaries, a decade or two ago about the judges of Colombia, that the defendants had to be blindfolded, couldn't see who the judge was because the judge's family could be murdered.
Right.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And the rebels in the jungle, and now 2022, the rebels have a peace. I don't even think there are rebels anymore. I think they're part of the government now.
Yeah, I don't know
FARC, I think they were called.
which store. Yeah, right. It had a funny name. And but yeah, I heard that a lot of those cocaine farms were being turned into government ran uh cocaine farms because the system was already there.
Yeah,
So they just said, hey, why not use this infrastructure that's already there? And
amazing.
it's just yeah, I've been to Colombia before,
Have you?
Bogota. My cousin married a Colombian woman, and so we went there for his wedding, their wedding, and it was amazing. What a beautiful country. Of course, it's just like any place, you want to stay within the areas that you're
There's
busy.
always a little of that.
Yeah, don't veer off, just common sense stuff. But gorgeous place. The food was insanely good. Fish caught right off of the day from the ocean.
Yeah.
Just beautiful people, just really nice. So yeah, Colombia's a beautiful country.
Hmm. It's on the list for me. I haven't had a chance. Well, no, I've been to three countries in South America. I was only going to say one, Brazil, but no, Argentina and Paraguay. No reason to ever go back to Paraguay.
Chile is beautiful too. Chile is like a
Ah, yeah.
like a little town, like a little country that was plucked from Europe and planted in South America. Kind of, it's really beautiful. I definitely would recommend that. Argentina also kind of like Buenos Aires. I was there. Is gorgeous. Uh,
Huh.
yeah.
Well, I was in very rural area of Argentina, so it doesn't give it justice. Nothing like
Yeah.
Buenos Aires. And I was in the airport in Chile, Santiago. That doesn't count.
Oh no. Well,
That
yeah.
doesn't,
If you would have just kind of, I don't know how. Did you have like a layover
I
there?
didn't. I had no time. I remember I got a Peruvian cola that was real interesting tasting. Um, that's the best way to put it. It was just interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know how to place it. I never would drink it again.
Mhm.
Um, and then I remember I got a beer, but they wouldn't let me take it on the plane, so I had to chug it right there. Um, but yeah, that was the extent of. So I had a beer in Chile. There we go. I had a
Okay.
beer.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, there we
Look to
go.
that.
So one day I'll get there. But I got one more thing for you actually.
Yeah.
It's kind of a my stay legal segment.
Perfect.
And this one is actually all about flying. And I got a little bit of inside information about this, just in the sense that I've spoken personally to a lot of airport officers and a lot of people doing screenings and stuff like that. And I hear stories about things they've confiscated or seen, or people they've arrested or let go. But just the blanket thing right now is that there's 19 states that have legalized. There's a handful more that may be legalizing additionally, and 37 states medical roughly. The point is a lot of states are legal in various ways. A lot of states are not legal in all ways, and then you have hybrids all over the place. So the point is that it's really not a good idea to fly with cannabis at this point in time, because you are putting yourself in federal jurisdiction. The federal government controls the air. The second that door closes on that airplane, and that's when your flight attendants start getting paid. Seen those videos. That is. I mean, technically, once you step in the airport, you're in federal jurisdiction, but definitely once you're in the air, there's no question about it. Um, but the point is that federal government, this stuff is not legal. And you could be a test case, you could be a poster child. Depends on that the state you're going to or coming from, and that person who was arresting you. But let me just tell you, they are you get some. TSA is a federal agency. They're the ones doing the screening. You have the local cops. That's the local cops who are, patrolling and policing the ticket counters, the drive ups, the drop offs, the parking lots, and of course walking the terminals. They're definitely in the terminals too. But when it comes to the screening, that's all federal employees. That's TSA. That's a federal employee. So depending on that person's individual preferences or opinions, they may just, choose to turn a blind eye, or they may choose, I'm tired of this crap and this person needs, I'm going to alert the authorities. And here's what happens when they alert the authorities. The authorities are generally going to be the local cops. So a lot of the time, so long as you are within legal quantities, they're probably just going to have you throw it away, because before you fly, because you're at the screening. But they see something that looks like pounds or multiple jars, and people are stupid. I get it. You want different strains and all that kind of stuff, but when you have 50 jars in your bag, that's 50 different strains argument. I like different
You
flavor.
deserve to get in trouble if you're being a moron and you're traveling with 50 jars. I'm sorry. I don't, it's just, you're asking for it.
And I hear those stories, and they see those jars. That's the thing. They can see that there's multiple jars. They can see a massive bag filled with something that was a leafy substance. They just don't know exactly what it is. But most people are not carrying oregano in a bag that looks like a pound. So they might say, got to take a look at this one, second screening, to the side, whatever. But anyway, it's just, if you're flying to a state that already is legal, the writing's on the wall. What are you doing? Go enjoy. They're already legal. If you're flying to a state that's not legal, well, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you bring some, because that would be illegal, and I don't want you to get in trouble. But you're going to do what you got to do. Maybe it's a medical state. Maybe you can work it out that way. But
Well, I'll just say this much. If you're in a state that where it's not legal, there's always access to it there. You can make your decision whether to try to find someone to help you get some or not. That's up to you, but that's always there for you. It's been there since Mike and I were
Sure.
California with cannabis being not legal. So we always had access to it if we ever wanted it. You just ask around, but that's up to you to make a decision on that, of course.
Yeah, it's just be smart about it when you're flying. You're on vacation, you're going for business, whatever you're doing. It's stressful to take it. It's in flying, as stressful as it is, it's just not a good idea. And in order to stay legal and be safe, and remember, cannabis causes paranoia as a side effect. You don't want, so let's keep the paranoia out. You don't bring it. And you hear these stories about canine dogs being retired because they're no longer needed for cannabis at various places. That doesn't mean all of the dogs are retired. And they're still looking for trafficking, massive amounts. And you could be caught up when they're looking for, they're walking a dog by and they just happen to walk by when you're there. And they're looking for the pounds and, oh, they scored finding a couple grams. No, not really, but you're the one that's now the poster child or the one that's going to be picked on.
Yeah.
And they didn't find anybody else. All right, come with us. Your vacation is ruined.
Yeah.
How much did you spend? Oh, well, that's going to suck because now you got to spend more on bail.
That is all the time we have today. We appreciate you spending yours with us. If you are in the Southern California area and are in need of a criminal defense attorney, Michael Reed of ReedWeed Law, Cannabis Legal Help, can be reached at cannabislegalhelp@gmail.com. You may follow Talk Tonic on all social media platforms at Talk Tonic Los Angeles. Join us next time for another episode of ReedWeed Law here on Talk Tonic Los Angeles. Mike, thank you so much for hanging out with us today, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Always a pleasure, man.
Take care.